Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I never thought my last normal day would start with such an ordinary sunrise. The sky was painting itself orange over I-70 as I pulled my Peterbilt into the Flying J just outside Kansas City. The date was August 15th, and I'd been on the road since 3 a.m., hauling medical supplies bound for Chicago. Nothing seemed off about that morning. Just another day in my 20 years of long-haul driving. The first hint that something was wrong came through the CB radio. Usually, Channel 19 is full of truckers warning about speed traps or sharing road conditions. But that morning, the chatter had an edge to it. Reports were coming in about accidents, lots of them all along the eastern routes. Multiple pileups on I-80, roadblocks forming on I-95. What caught my attention wasn't just the number of incidents, it was how the other drivers described them. "Got myself a situation here at mile marker 232, one voice crackled through. "Some guy just walked right into traffic, wasn't even fazed when that SUV clipped him. He just got back up." I remember adjusting the volume, listening more intently as I filled my thermos with coffee. The cashier inside the truck stop was fixated on the TV mounted above the register. Local news was showing helicopter footage of gridlocked highways leading out of St. Louis. The crawler at the bottom mentioned something about a rapidly spreading virus. "Hey, Mac," called out Betty, the morning shift manager I'd known for years. Her voice trembled slightly. "You might want to see this." The newsfeed switched to shaky cell phone footage from an emergency room in Springfield. Medical staff in hazmat suits were restraining a patient who was thrashing violently on a gurney. The camera caught a glimpse of their face, pale, veins darkened and prominent, eyes wrong. The feed cut out abruptly. "Probably some drug thing," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Remember that bath salt scare a few years back?" Betty just shook her head, her eyes never leaving the screen. More truckers were filing in, gathering around the TV. The morning regulars who usually grabbed their coffee and hit the road were staying put, watching the news with growing unease. My CB crackled again. "This is Big Joe coming up on Jeff City. Got a major incident here. Military convoy heading east, moving fast. Never seen anything like it." I stepped outside, scanning the horizon. The summer air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite name. More vehicles were pulling into the truck stop now, not just truckers, but families in packed cars, some with belongings strapped to their roofs. That's when my phone rang. It was dispatch. "Mac, you copy? Where are you?" "Just outside KC, topped off and ready to roll." "Listen carefully." Rachel's voice was tight, professional, but I could hear the strain. "We're getting reports. The situation in Chicago is deteriorating. They're implementing emergency protocols. Your cargo just got prioritized. Critical medical supplies." "What's really going on, Sarah?" There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Honestly, nobody's sure. But whatever it is, it's spreading fast. Major cities are getting hit hard. Just get that cargo through. And Mac, be careful." I climbed back into my cab, settled into the familiar leather seat that had been my second home for so many miles. The CB chatter was getting worse. Reports of accidents were giving way to reports of violence. The word infected kept coming up. As I pulled out onto I-70 East, I noticed more military vehicles heading the opposite direction. Humvees and transport trucks moving with urgent purpose. My hands tightened on the wheel. 20 years on the road teaches you to read signs, to sense when something's not right. And everything about this morning was screaming wrong. The first real confirmation came about an hour later. Traffic had been steady but moving, until it wasn't. The eastbound lanes gradually slowed to a crawl, then stopped completely. Through my elevated vantage point, I could see for nearly a mile ahead. Cars were scattered across all 3 lanes, some with doors hanging open. People were getting out of their vehicles, some running, others just standing there, staring ahead. That's when I saw it. About a quarter-mile up, a figure stumbled out from between two abandoned cars. Their movements were disturbing, like broken marionettes with snapped strings. Heads lolling at unnatural angles, limbs twitching spasmodically. They moved with a predator's focus, launching themselves at a woman who had stepped out of her minivan. Her scream carried clearly through the morning air. I grabbed my CB mic. "Breaker, breaker, we got trouble ahead at mile marker 128. Some kind of assault in progress." More figures were emerging now, moving with that same unnatural gait. The CB exploded with chatter as other drivers spotted them too. I watched in horror as the infection scenario we'd all seen in movies played out in real time on I-70. This is eastbound tanker. I'm seeing multiple hostiles. They're attacking people. Got the same thing westbound. They're climbing the median. Jesus Christ, they're not stopping when you hit them. The next few minutes were chaos. People abandoned their vehicles, running in all directions. Those things, the infected, were everywhere now. Their movements were driven by pure animal instinct, attacking anyone they could reach. The sound of screams mixed with breaking glass and the occasional gunshot. I sat there in my cab, 18 wheels locked in place, watching the world fall apart through my windshield. The medical supplies in my trailer felt like they were burning a hole in my conscience. People needed these now more than ever. But the highway ahead was a solid wall of abandoned vehicles. That's when I spotted the access road through my driver's side mirror. It was barely visible, a service entrance half hidden behind the guardrail. In my 2 decades of driving this route, I'd never had reason to notice it before. But now, as the infected began to surround the trapped vehicles around me, it looked like my only option. I had to make a choice: stay with the convoy and hope help arrived, or take a chance on an unknown road. As I watched another person fall to the infected barely 50 yards ahead, I realized there was really no choice at all. I checked my mirrors, saw a small gap in the right lane. Just enough room to maneuver if I was careful. Real careful. With the precision that comes from years of handling an 80,000-pound rig, I began to turn my wheel. Then I heard the banging on my passenger door. "Help! Please let me in!" A woman in medical scrubs was frantically trying to climb up to my cab, an elderly man struggling to keep up behind her. The infected were closing in fast. In this job, you learn to make split-second decisions. Lives could depend on reading a situation right, reacting fast. But nothing in my 20 years had prepared me for this moment. I reached over and pulled the door handle. I yanked the passenger door open as the woman practically threw herself up into the cab. She turned immediately to help the older man, who was struggling with the high step. Through my side mirror, I could see 3 infected lurching toward us, their bodies twitching with that awful puppet-like motion, jaws snapping mindlessly. "Pull him up!" I shouted, reaching across to grab the man's other arm. Together, we hauled him inside just as grasping hands scraped against the truck's exterior. The woman slammed the door shut, and the sound of fists pounding against metal filled the cab. "I'm Dr. Emily Chen," she gasped, still catching her breath. "This is Frank, one of my patients. Thank you. Thank you for stopping." Frank slumped in the middle seat, wheezing. He was pale, but not the ghastly white of the infected, just exhausted. Emily checked his pulse while I surveyed our situation through the mirrors. The service road was still accessible, but I'd need to thread the needle between 2 abandoned cars. The infected were now swarming around my truck, clawing uselessly at the high cab. Their vacant eyes reflected in my mirrors, pupils blown wide with mindless hunger. "Hold on tight," I warned, throwing the truck into gear. "This is gonna get rough." I'd spent years perfecting the art of maneuvering 80,000 pounds through tight spaces. Now those skills meant the difference between life and death. I turned the wheel hard, feeling the resistance as the truck pushed against a small sedan. Metal screamed against metal, but the car moved just enough. "What happened back there?" I asked as we crawled toward the access road. "Where did you come from?" Emily was still monitoring Frank's breathing, but her voice was steady. "County Memorial Hospital. When the first cases came in, we thought it was rabies or some new viral encephalitis. The victims were aggressive, feverish. Then they started changing within hours of exposure." She paused, collecting herself. It spreads through bites. Once you're infected, you've got maybe 30 minutes before the fever hits, then seizures, then… She didn't need to finish. We'd all seen what came next. The access road was barely wide enough for my rig, branches scraping against the trailer as we wound through dense Missouri woodland. The CB radio had gone eerily quiet. Either everyone had evacuated or… I pushed that thought aside. Frank here, Emily continued. He's got a heart condition. We were evacuating the critical patients when everything went sideways. The National Guard was supposed to come, but… She shook her head. I checked my fuel gauge. 3/4 full. In normal conditions, that would get me halfway to Chicago, but these weren't normal conditions. I've got medical supplies in the trailer, I said. Critical shipment for Chicago, but from what I'm hearing on the radio, the cities are the worst places to be right now. Emily nodded grimly. The infection spreads fastest in dense populations. Hospitals were the first to fall, then police stations, emergency shelters, anywhere people gathered looking for help. The access road eventually connected to a state highway. It was clearer than the interstate, but not deserted. Abandoned cars dotted the shoulder, some with doors still open. We passed a minivan crashed into a tree, its windshield spiderwebbed but intact. No signs of the occupants. We need a plan, I said, scanning the road ahead. This rig is tough, but it's slow. We need somewhere defensible to… Look out! Emily's warning came just as a figure sprinted into the road. I hit the brakes, the truck's air horns blasting. It was a young man, maybe college age, waving his arms frantically. Behind him, emerging from a ditch, came 5 infected. They moved with that same broken, twitching gait, but the hunger driving them was terrifyingly focused. Another split-second decision. The cab was already crowded. We had no weapons, no real plan. But I couldn't just… I downshifted, letting the engine's roar serve as a warning, and turned the wheel slightly. The infected were closing in on the young man. In my mind, I could already hear Rachel from dispatch. The cargo is critical. But what good were medical supplies if we lost our humanity trying to deliver them? The truck's front bumper caught the nearest infected, sending it flying into the ditch. I pulled alongside the running man, and Emily was already opening the door. "Hurry!" she shouted. He grabbed the handholds and pulled himself up just as another infected lunged for his legs. Emily and Frank pulled him fully inside as I floored the accelerator. In my mirror, I watched the small group of infected stumble after us before falling behind. "Mike Thompson," the young man panted, wedged into what little space remained in the cab. I was at Missouri State, trying to get home to my family in Columbia when they hit the campus. "How long ago?" Emily asked, her doctor's instincts kicking in as she checked him for bites. Just this morning, around dawn. It was like something out of a nightmare. People just started attacking each other in the dorms. No warning, no explanation. I grabbed my backpack and ran. I glanced at the time. Not even noon yet. Hard to believe how quickly the world had unraveled. The radio suddenly crackled to life. "This is an emergency broadcast. The following counties are under martial law: Jackson, Clay, Platte." The list went on, covering most of Missouri's major population centers. Residents are ordered to shelter in place. Do not attempt to reach emergency services. Do not… Static cut off the transmission. In its place came the distant thrum of helicopter rotors. "Military?" Mike asked hopefully. I shook my head, spotting the aircraft through the windshield. "News chopper, heading toward Kansas City. They're evacuating Chicago," Emily said quietly. "And St. Louis. Probably every major city by now. Where does that leave us?" Frank, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. His voice was weak but clear. "There's a National Guard armory in Jefferson City. My son's stationed there. If anywhere's still secure." I considered our options. The armory would have weapons, supplies, maybe even information about safe zones. But Jeff City meant going further east, deeper into heavily populated areas. The infected we'd seen so far were bad enough. How much worse would it be in a capital city? The decision was made for us when we rounded a bend and saw what lay ahead. The highway was completely blocked. A tanker truck had overturned, its trailer stretched across both lanes. Dozens of vehicles were piled up around it, and moving through the wreckage were more shapes, too many to count, all exhibiting that terrible marionette motion. "Hold on," I said, already turning the wheel. There was a narrow access road to the right, barely more than a dirt track, but it headed south. Away from the infected, away from the cities, away from my planned route and the critical cargo I was supposed to deliver. As we bounced onto the rough road, I thought about all the years I'd spent following maps, staying on schedule, delivering on time. But the old rules didn't apply anymore. The only delivery that mattered now was getting these people somewhere safe. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees as we headed south, none of us knowing what we'd find, all of us understanding that there was no going back. In the side mirror, I caught one last glimpse of the highway before the trees swallowed us up. The infected were still there, shambling aimlessly through the wreckage of the world we'd known. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of sirens wailed across the Missouri countryside, calling more of them out of hiding. The dirt road led us to a small farming community, just a cluster of buildings surrounded by vast cornfields swaying in the August heat. A rusted sign welcomed us to Miller's Creek, population 342. The place looked untouched by the chaos we'd left behind, almost suspended in time. "We need to stop," Emily said, checking Frank's pulse again. "His medication's wearing off and he needs rest." I spotted a grain elevator rising above the town like a fortress. The surrounding lot was empty except for a few pickup trucks, and the elevated position would give us good visibility, perfect for a brief respite. The facility's office door was unlocked. Inside, everything spoke of a hasty departure. Coffee still warm in a pot, papers scattered across desks, a radio playing static. Mike helped Frank into a chair while Emily searched for a first aid kit. "I'll check the perimeter," I said, grabbing a crowbar from my toolkit. The weight felt reassuring in my hands. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the storage silos. Each step on the metal walkways echoed across the empty facility. From this height, I could see for miles, fields of corn stretching to the horizon, a few isolated farmhouses, thin columns of smoke rising in the distance. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned, expecting the worst, but it was just torn plastic sheeting flapping in the wind. That's when I noticed the radio tower on the roof of the main office. Back inside, Emily had found some aspirin for Frank. Mike was at the window keeping watch. The kid had adapted quickly to our situation, no trace left of the panicked student we'd rescued. "Found something interesting," I said, gesturing upward. "Radio tower. Might be able to pick up some emergency broadcasts, maybe even contact other survivors. Or call for help," Mike added hopefully. I shook my head. "Help's not coming, son. Not anytime soon. But information, that's worth its weight in gold right now." The facility's radio equipment was basic but functional. After some trial and error, we managed to pick up scattered transmissions. Most were automated emergency broadcasts, but occasionally we caught fragments of human voices. "Safe zone established at Fort Leonard Wood. CDC confirms byte transmission vector. Bridges closed. No access to." Static consumed most of the messages, but one came through clearly, a military frequency discussing supply routes. They mentioned a FEMA depot northwest of Jefferson City that was still operational. More importantly, they were advising all units to avoid population centers. "They're writing off the cities," Emily said quietly. "Containment's already failed." A distant engine sound interrupted our discussion. Through the office window, we spotted a pickup truck speeding down the main road, headed straight for the grain elevator. 2 more vehicles followed close behind. "They're running from something," Mike said, squinting into the distance. The lead truck skidded into the lot, gravel spraying. A man jumped out, waving frantically at the office. Behind their vehicles, movement in the cornfield, shapes pushing through the stalks pursuing the convoy. "Get Frank away from the windows," I ordered, already moving toward the door. These people needed help, but we couldn't risk exposing our position. The man reached the office first, practically falling through the door. "They're right behind us," he gasped. "Whole damn farm's overrun." He was middle-aged, dressed in overalls, and a John Deere cap. 2 younger men and a teenage girl followed him in, all carrying hastily packed bags and hunting rifles. "Close the doors," I said. "Quiet as you can, no lights." From our elevated position, we watched as figures emerged from the cornfield. They moved through the rows with singular purpose, drawn by the sound of engines and voices. But in the fading daylight, something was different about their behavior. "They're not attacking each other," Emily whispered. Earlier at the hospital, they'd turn on anyone, even other infected. But now, they're hunting as a group, I finished. The implications sent a chill down my spine. The farmer introduced himself as Bill Henderson. The others were his sons, Tom and Andrew, and his daughter Katie. They'd been trying to reach the National Guard roadblock they'd heard about on the radio. "Ain't nothing left that way," Bill said, pointing east. "Roads blocked at the county line. Military's gone. Saw some of their vehicles abandoned, blood everywhere." I shared what we'd heard about the FEMA depot. "It's risky," I admitted, "but they'll have supplies, communications, maybe even transport." "Supplies we got," Tom said, patting his rifle. "Need fuel, though. Our trucks are running on fumes." That's when I remembered my trailer full of medical supplies. In the chaos, I'd almost forgotten my original mission. "I've got something better than guns," I said. "But we need a plan to reach that depot." Emily spread out a road map on the desk. "Main highways are death traps, but these back roads..." She traced a route with her finger. "If we stick to farmland, avoid towns. We'll need a scout vehicle," Andrew suggested. "Something fast to run ahead of the trucks." Frank stirred in his chair. "The infected, they're drawn to noise, engines, gunshots. But they can't see well in darkness," Katie added. Everyone turned to look at her. At the farm, they were more active in daylight. At night, they seemed confused. It was a solid observation. We had about 4 hours of daylight left, time to plan, gather what we needed, and wait for darkness. The infected below still prowled the lot, but they were spreading out, losing interest without fresh stimuli. Bill's group had weapons and local knowledge. We had my truck and medical supplies. Together, we might have a chance at reaching the depot. But first, we needed to deal with our immediate situation. The grain elevator's control room offered a solution. The facility ran on industrial generators, and the grain distribution system was essentially one massive noisemaker. If we could power it up, we create a diversion, I explained. Draw them away from the vehicles. Once the area's clear, we move fast and quiet. Emily studied the growing shadows outside. "And if the depot's already fallen? Then we keep moving," I said. "Find somewhere defensible, wait for help, or..." I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't. We all knew help might never come. The world we'd woken up to this morning was gone. All we could do now was adapt. As the sun began to set, we finalized our plans. Bill and his sons checked their weapons while Katie helped Emily organize our medical supplies. Mike worked on rigging the grain machinery for our diversion. Frank rested, gathering strength for the journey ahead. I stood at the window, watching darkness creep across the Missouri farmland. Somewhere out there was safety, or at least the hope of it. But the night ahead would test everything we thought we knew about survival. The real question wasn't whether we'd make it to the depot. It was whether we'd recognize ourselves by the time we got there. The grain elevator's ancient machinery groaned to life, filling the twilight with a deep mechanical rumble. Mike had wired the control panel to run on a timer, giving us 15 minutes before the system would engage fully. From the office window, we watched the infected immediately react to the sound, their heads snapping toward the noise in unison. "Remember," I whispered to our group, "we move in teams. Bill's boys take point in their truck. Katie stays with Emily and Frank in the middle vehicle. I'll bring up the rear with the rig. No headlights until we're 2 miles out." Tom and Andrew had already hot-wired an abandoned pickup truck to replace one of their fuel-depleted vehicles. They'd loaded it with rifles and what remained of their ammunition. The Henderson family knew their weapons. Generations of hunting had taught them well. "What about me?" Mike asked, adjusting his backpack. "You ride shotgun with me," I said. "I need someone watching the trailer. Those medical supplies might save more lives than our guns." The timer hit 0. The grain distribution system activated, metal chutes clattering as they began moving phantom cargo. The sound echoed across the empty lot, drawing the infected toward the far side of the facility. They moved like a tide of broken bodies, singularly focused on the mechanical din. "Now," Bill whispered. We moved as one unit, staying low and fast. The first truck started with just a soft rumble, Tom keeping the RPMs down as they rolled toward the access road. Katie helped Frank into the middle vehicle while Emily kept watch. I climbed into my rig, Mike right behind me. The infected never turned. They pressed against the grain elevator's walls, clawing at the metal, driven by pure instinct to reach the source of the noise. Our convoy slipped away into the gathering darkness like ghosts. The moon was rising as we hit the back roads, casting everything in pale silver light. Bill had grown up in these parts. He knew every dirt track and farm crossing. We followed the lead truck's red taillights, maintaining complete radio silence. An hour into our journey, we encountered our first obstacle. A bridge ahead had collapsed, its middle section fallen into the creek below. Recent, judging by the lack of warning signs or detour markers. The chaos must have reached even these remote areas. Bill flashed his brake lights, our signal to stop. We gathered between the vehicles to plan our next move. "There's another crossing," he whispered, pointing north. "Old railroad bridge. Ain't been used in years, but it's solid steel. Truck might make it." "Might?" Emily asked. "Better than turning back," I said. "How far?" 3 miles. Have to cut through the Whitaker property." The Whitaker farm stood dark and silent as we approached. No lights, no movement. Just acres of untended fields and a cluster of buildings silhouetted against the stars. The road to the railroad bridge ran right past the main house. Tom and Andrew took point, checking the area on foot while we waited with the vehicles. They returned 10 minutes later, faces grim. "Family's still there," Tom reported. They're turned, all of them, locked themselves in the house." "Will they stay put?" I asked. "Doors secure, they're just standing in there, kind of swaying. But any noise, we had no choice, the bridge was our only option." Bill led us on a wide arc around the house, every engine at its lowest possible idle. The infected Whitaker family never stirred. The railroad bridge was exactly as Bill described. A steel skeleton spanning the creek, its tracks long since removed. Rust-streaked girders rose into the night sky. It looked barely wide enough for my truck. "I'll test it first," Bill said, driving the lead pickup slowly onto the structure. Metal creaked but held. The second vehicle followed. Then it was our turn. I eased the rig forward, feeling every bump and shift through the steering wheel. Mike held his breath beside me. Halfway across, something snapped beneath us, a support bolt giving way. The trailer lurched sideways. I fought the wheel, trying to keep us level. One wrong move and we'd take the whole bridge down. Through my side mirror, I could see the trailer's wheels inches from the edge. The bridge groaned like a dying thing. That's when we heard it. A police siren, distant but approaching fast. Red and blue lights pulsed on the horizon. "No, no, no," Mike muttered. The sound would draw every infected for miles. We were trapped on the bridge, balanced between survival and disaster. As the approaching siren grew louder, a figure appeared in the house behind us. Mr. Whitaker, or what used to be him, drawn to the window by the noise. Then another, and another. The whole family pressing against the glass with vacant eyes. Come on," I urged the truck forward, feeling the bridge protest every inch. The trailer's wheels found purchase again. We were almost across. The police car burst into view on the main road, swerving wildly. No driver that I could see, just an empty vehicle, lights flashing and siren blaring. Probably set off during the initial chaos. It careened off the road and slammed into a tree, the siren cutting out with a dying wail. But the damage was done. The Whitaker house's windows exploded outward as the family crashed through them, drawn by the noise. Other shapes emerged from the darkness, farmhands, field workers. All infected, all moving toward us with that horrible puppet-like gait. I gunned the engine for the final few feet, the bridge's protests lost in the sound of pursuit. We cleared the span just as the infected reached it. In my mirror, I watched them try to follow, some falling through gaps to the creek below, others pressing forward driven by mindless hunger. The bridge held, barely. We regrouped on the other side, every face showing the same mix of relief and terror. We'd made it across, but the siren had changed everything. Every infected in range would be converging on this area. "New plan," Bill said, unfolding his map in the moonlight. "We can't risk the main roads now, have to go deep country." The FEMA depot was still hours away, and now we'd have to take an even longer route. Emily spoke up. "Frank needs real medical attention soon. The supplies in your trailer will help, but..." "We'll make it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We've come this far." As if to mock my words, a chorus of inhuman shrieks rose from the darkness behind us. The infected were finding new ways across the creek. "Move out," Bill ordered. "Stay tight, stay quiet, dawn's coming." We returned to our vehicles and pressed on into the night. The moon cast our shadows ahead of us, a small convoy of survivors, rolling through the heart of America's nightmare. In my side mirror, I could still see the bridge and the writhing shapes trying to cross it. The depot waited somewhere ahead. But as I listened to the CB radio's empty static, I wondered what kind of world we'd find when we got there. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Missouri countryside as our convoy pushed through the back roads. After the bridge incident, Bill led us deeper into farming territory, each turn taking us further from marked roads. The dashboard clock read 3:45 p.m., less than 10 hours since I'd stopped for coffee at that Flying J, though it felt like a lifetime ago. Frank's condition was deteriorating. Through the CB radio, Emily reported his breathing had become labored. The medical supplies in my trailer might help, but we needed a secure location to properly treat him. Time wasn't on our side. "Movement ahead," Tom's voice crackled through the radio. The lead truck slowed and we followed suit. A school bus blocked the narrow dirt road, angled across both lanes. Its emergency light still flashed weakly, clicking in the silence. No signs of life or death visible through the windows. "We can't turn the rig around here," I said into the radio. "Have to move it." Bill's truck pulled alongside the bus. Tom and Andrew approached cautiously, rifles ready. The bus door hung open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Dark stains marked the yellow paint near the entrance. A child's backpack lay in the dirt, its contents scattered. Pokémon cards fluttered in the wind, bright colors against the dusty ground. Mike turned away, and I pretended not to notice him wiping his eyes. The brothers disappeared inside the bus. Moments later, we heard the release of air brakes. The bus rolled backward, guided by Tom at the wheel, until enough space cleared for our vehicles to pass. "Road's clear," Andrew reported, "but we found tracks heading east, fresh ones, lots of them." According to Bill's map, we were nearing the FEMA depot's supposed location. The terrain had changed, more industrial buildings appearing among the farmland, signs of the city's outer reach. At 4:30 p.m., we crested a hill and saw it, a massive warehouse complex surrounded by chain-link fence. Military vehicles dotted the parking lot. A handful of figures moved with purpose between buildings. Living people, not infected. "Thank God," Emily breathed over the radio. Then we noticed the smoke. Small fires burned around the perimeter. The fence was damaged in several places. As we watched, a Humvee crashed through the main gate, speeding away from the facility. "Something's wrong," Bill warned. A new sound carried across the valley. Automatic weapons fire, punctuated by screams. More vehicles began pouring out of the depot, military and civilian alike. They weren't defending the position, they were abandoning it. "We can't stay here," I said. "If they're running..." An explosion rocked the facility's eastern building. Through my binoculars, I spotted what the soldiers were running from. Infected poured through the fence breaches like ants, dozens becoming hundreds. The depot's remaining defenders were quickly overwhelmed. "Back up," I ordered. Quietly. Too late. The fleeing vehicles had spotted our convoy. 3 trucks broke from the main group, heading straight for us. Behind them, the infected followed the noise and movement, their broken marionette forms surging up the hill. "Scatter," Bill commanded. "Meet at the backup point." Our convoy split. Bill's truck roared down a side road while Katie's vehicle cut across an empty field. I had no choice. The rig couldn't handle off-road terrain. I stayed on the main path, accelerating as much as I dared. Mike braced himself as we picked up speed. Up ahead was an old quarry road, steep grade, hairpin turns, barely wide enough for my trailer. No one who didn't know these routes would risk it. The rig's engine roared as we hit the turn. The trailer swayed dangerously but held. The quarry road took us deep into a maze of service tracks and abandoned mining sites. By the time we emerged, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The backup point was an old ranger station Bill had mentioned. Defensible, hidden and stocked with emergency supplies. We were the last to arrive. The others had made it safely, though Katie's vehicle sported fresh dents from their off-road escape. Frank was unconscious when we carried him inside. Emily immediately went to work, finally able to access the medical supplies from my trailer. The rest of us secured the perimeter, treating injuries and taking stock of our situation. "Depot's gone," Bill said, cleaning his rifle. "Whole area's compromised. We need a new plan." I nodded, studying a map spread across the station's desk. The last 9 hours had taught us harsh lessons about survival. Cities meant death. Main roads were death traps. Our only chance was to stay mobile, stay small, and stay ahead of the infection's spread. "There's a place," I said slowly, "up in the Ozarks. Old hunting lodge I used to deliver to. Remote, defendable, enough land to sustain a small group." I thought about the cargo in my trailer. Those supplies had been bound for Chicago, meant to save lives in the city, but the cities were lost. Now maybe they could help keep our small group alive long enough to see another sunrise. "We move at first light," I decided. Together. No one argued. We'd started this day as strangers, a trucker, a doctor, an old man, and a farming family. Now we were something else, something stronger. Outside, darkness crept across the Missouri countryside. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed their final notes before falling silent. The world we'd known was gone, transformed in the space of 12 hours into something unrecognizable. But we had survived. Not just survived, we had kept our humanity. In the end, that was the most important cargo of all. Emily emerged from the back room, exhausted but smiling. "Frank's stabilized," she reported. "He's going to make it." I nodded, feeling the weight of the day in every muscle. In a few hours we'd face new challenges, new decisions. But for now, in this moment, we had this small victory. The last light faded from the sky as our first night in this new world began. None of us knew what tomorrow would bring, but we'd face it together, carrying the lessons of those 12 hours with us into whatever future waited beyond the dawn.